Good morning, everyone, and Boker Tov from Sinai Temple on this beautiful March morning here in Los Angeles. One of the most beautiful aspects of Jewish life is how our calendar, not just our regular calendar, but our Jewish calendar, how our Jewish calendar connects us to sacred time. More than just marking the passage of days and weeks, this Jewish calendar provides a rhythm that shapes our spiritual consciousness. Every holiday, fast day, and special Shabbat serves as a signpost on our collective journey, guiding us towards a greater awareness of our covenant with God. This week's Torah portion, we're in Parashat Tetzaveh from the book of Exodus, Shemot. It falls within a particularly meaningful time in our Jewish calendar. We're actually, if you can believe it or not, in the weeks leading up to Pesach. Passover is not too far away. And this is a period filled with special Torah readings and themes that help us prepare spiritually and communally for the experience of redemption. In addition to our weekly Parasha, we observe 4 special Shabbatot. Last week, Shabbat Shekalim, Zachor this week, in a couple weeks, Para, and then Shabbat HaChodesh. And all of this will culminate in Shabbat HaGadol, the great Shabbat before Pesach. Each of these Shabbatot carries a unique message, forming a spiritual journey that parallels our ancestors' redemption from Egypt. Through these weeks, we move from communal responsibility in Shekalim to remembrance and resilience in Zachor, purification in Para, renewal in Shabbat HaChodesh, and then final preparation in Shabbat HaGadol. Together, these Shabbatot build momentum towards Pesach, helping us prepare for redemption, not just historically, but personally and communally. Let's explore how these special Shabbatot fit into the cycle of the Jewish year, the deeper messages that they impart, and how our Parasha this morning, Parashat Tetzaveh, ties into this theme of sacred preparation. Parashat Tetzaveh continues the intricate instructions regarding the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and focuses particularly on the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, and his sacred duties. The portion begins with a command regarding the Ner Tamid. We're in Shemot 27:20, Exodus 27, verse 20. And the beginning of the Parsha states, Ve'ata tetzavet b'nei Yisrael, ve'ikhu elecha shemen zayit zach katit lama'or, laha'alot ner tamid. And you shall command the children of Israel that they shall bring unto you pure olive oil beaten for the light, to cause a lamp, ner tamid, to burn continually. This passage establishes an essential theme that runs through both our Parasha and the upcoming special Shabbatot. The idea of eternal presence and continuity in our Jewish practice. The Ner Tamid, which burns continuously in every synagogue today, including in both our Ziegler Sanctuary and Cohen Chapel, you can see that light that never turns off. It symbolizes the Jewish people's enduring faith and the unbroken transmission of tradition. The Ramban, Nachmanides, comments that the Ner Tamid represents the Shekhinah, the divine presence, that never departs from Israel. Just as the oil-fed flame must be continually replenished, so too must we continually nourish our connection to Torah, mitzvot, and our kehillah, our community. Similarly, the garments of the Kohanim, the priests, which are described in great detail in Tetzaveh, symbolize different aspects of spiritual leadership and the way holiness is expressed in our actions. The Talmud, in Tractate Zvachim 88b, states that each garment of the high priest atones for a specific sin, reinforcing the idea that ritual, responsibility, and atonement are interconnected. How does this relate to the special Shabbatot leading up to Pesach? The role of the Kohen Gadol was to help the people prepare for moments of sacred transformation, such as Yom Kippur, Pesach, and the great pilgrimage festivals. Parashat Tetzaveh offers a blueprint for spiritual readiness, reminding us that transformation does not happen automatically. It requires dedication, action, and reflection. So last week, we observed Shabbat Shekalim, the first of the 4 special Shabbatot leading up to Pesach. This Shabbat is named for the half-shekel donation that every Israelite was required to give annually to support the communal offerings in the Beit Mikdash. And the Parasha starts, chapter 30, verse 13, not the Parasha, but this section of Shekalim. It says over here, Zayitnu kol ha'over al ha'pekudim machatzit ha'shekel b'shekel ha'kodesh esrim gera ha'shekel machatzit ha'shekel truma ladonai. This they shall give. Everyone that passes among those who are counted, everyone among age 20 and older, chatzi shekel, half of a shekel, after the shekel of the sanctuary. This seemingly simple commandment carries profound lessons about our Jewish life and responsibility. The half shekel was unique. It wasn't a voluntary donation, nor was it a full shekel. So why only half? The Midrash in Tanhuma, from Ki Tisa, chapter 9, explains that this symbolizes that no Jew is complete on their own. Every individual is part of a larger communal whole, and only together can we fulfill our spiritual mission. This teaches us that redemption is not an individual effort. It requires collective responsibility. Just as the half shekel supported the communal sacrifices in the temple, so too does Jewish life today rely on each of our own contributions. Whether through Torah, mitzvot, gemilut chasadim, Torah, or mitzvahs, good deeds, active loving kindness, we all rely on each other to make our community whole. Last week on Shabbat Shekalim, it was a particularly unique circumstance because it was one of the rare occasions where we read from 3 Torah scrolls. We had 1 Torah for the weekly Parasha, which was Mishpatim, which was Truma, and then 1 for Rosh Chodesh Adar, and then 1 for the Maftir of Shekalim. This only happens when Rosh Chodesh falls on Shabbat and coincides with a special Shabbat like Shekalim, or it can also happen in the wintertime with Shabbat Rosh Chodesh Chanukah. In these rare moments, the Torah reading becomes a multi-layered experience, emphasizing the intersection of time, holiness, and responsibility. Shabbat Shekalim marks the beginning of our preparation for Passover. Just as the Israelites contributed to the Mishkan in the desert before receiving the Torah, so too must we contribute, both spiritually and physically, as we prepare for the holiday of freedom and renewal. Ramban teaches that true freedom is not about escaping oppression, but about entering into a covenant of responsibility. Pesach is not just about leaving Egypt. It's about what we do afterwards. Do we build, contribute, and uplift others? Or do we focus only on ourselves? Shabbat Shekalim challenges us to ask how we are contributing to our Jewish community, ensuring that we are active participants in our own redemption. This week, we're going to be observing Shabbat Zachor, which is the Shabbat of remembrance. And it's always read on the Shabbat before Purim. And we do invite you to our wonderful Purim Carnival coming up this Sunday, and our wonderful Purim Spiel, which is coming up on Erev Purim on the 13th. So Shabbat Zachor is always read on the Shabbat before Purim, and the Maftir reading comes from close to the very, very end of the Torah, from the end of Deuteronomy, chapter 25, verse 17 through 19, And it commands us to remember Amalek, the nation that attacked Israel in the wilderness. It says, Zachor et asher asa lecha Amalek. Remember what Amalek did to you on the way when you were leaving Egypt. And it says, Timche et zecher Amalek mitachat hashamayim lo tishkach. You shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under the heaven. Do not forget. At first glance, this commandment may seem purely historical, but its timing before Purim is no coincidence. Haman, the villain of the Purim story, is identified as a descendant of Agag, the king of Amalek. We see that in the Megillah, in Esther, chapter 3, verse 1. The Torah is telling us that Amalek is not just a nation of the past. It represents an eternal threat to Jewish survival. Rambam, in his Mishnah Torah, Laws of Kings, chapter 1, verse 1, explains that the mitzvah to wipe out Amalek is not just about defeating a physical enemy, but about eradicating the ideology of Amalek, an ideology of hatred, cruelty, and denial of divine justice. The Talmud in Sanhedrin 20b states that Amalek's attack was unique because it was motivated by pure hatred, striking the Israelites at their weakest moment from behind. This is why the Torah emphasizes, they attacked you when you were weary and tired, in Deuteronomy 25:18. Amalek preyed on the vulnerable. They targeted the stragglers rather than facing Israel directly in battle. On Purim, we celebrate the downfall of Haman, a direct descendant of Amalek. His plan to destroy the Jewish people echoes Amalek's attack in the wilderness. But our response is different. Instead of simply remembering the pain of our enemies, we reaffirm our commitment to our own Jewish survival. And we fight darkness with joy. We fight hatred with unity and fear with faith. Shabbat Zachor reminds us that Jewish identity is not passive. It must be protected, nurtured, and celebrated. Just as the Israelites had to fight Amalek in every generation, we too must actively combat threats to Jewish community, whether through education, study, action, or communal engagement. The Ramban, Nachmanides, teaches that the commandment to remember Amalek is not just about the past memory, but also about present responsibility. What does it mean to blot out Amalek today? How do we ensure that our Jewish people remain strong in every generation? This Shabbat, as we prepare for Purim, we are reminded that Jewish joy is not naive. It's defiant. It's a joy that acknowledges hardship, but refuses to be broken by it. We remember Zachor so that we can move forward with strength. 2 weeks from now, we will observe Shabbat Parah, another one of the four special Shabbatot leading up to Passover. This Shabbat focuses on the ritual of the Parah Adumah, the red heifer, described in Numbers 19. The Torah explains that the ashes of a red heifer mixed with water were used to purify those who had become ritually impure so that they could enter the temple and participate in the Korban Pesach, the Passover offering. At first glance, this ancient purification ritual might seem distant from our lives today. However, the sages understood the Parah Adumah as more than just a physical cleansing. It was also a spiritual transformation that prepared the people for redemption. The Talmud in Yoma 14a links the ashes of the red heifer to the concept of personal and communal renewal. Before Passover, we must engage in both external and internal purification. Externally, we clean our homes of chametz, removing any physical leavened bread. Internally, we cleanse ourselves spiritually ridding our hearts of arrogance, negativity, and complacency. Rav Kook describes the purification process of the Para Aduma as a metaphor for teshuvah, repentance, a reminder that true redemption begins from within. Just as the Israelites prepared for the Exodus by purifying themselves, we too must prepare ourselves for the spiritual renewal of Pesach. One of the most puzzling aspects of the Para Aduma is in its paradoxical nature. The ashes of the red heifer purified those who were impure, yet those involved in its preparation became impure themselves. Rashi, quoting the Midrash, Bamidbar Rabbah 19.3, explains that this is a chok, a Torah law beyond human understanding. The Sfat Emet teaches that this paradox reflects the nature of spiritual transformation. Sometimes we must confront impurity to achieve purity. And sometimes we must face difficulty to grow stronger. The lesson of Shabbat Parah is that before Pesach, we must not only clean our homes, but also our souls. We must rid ourselves of spiritual impurities, anger, resentment, and selfishness, so that we can fully embrace the freedom and holiness of Passover. 2 weeks after that, we're going to observe Shabbat HaChodesh. And this occurs on the Shabbat before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the first day of the month of Nisan. And it marks the beginning of the Exodus story. And if we look back at the portion in chapter 12, verse 10, it's read from verses 1 through 20, and it includes the first mitzvah given to the Jewish people as a nation. It says, Vayomer Adonai el Moshe ve'el Aharon be'eretz Mitzrayim lemor, HaChodesh hazeh lachem, Rosh HaChodashim Rishon hu lachem lechodshei hashana. This month shall be for you the beginning of the months. Exodus 12 and 2. 12, verse 2. This passage is more than just a calendar note. It's a declaration of freedom. The Midrash in Shemot Rabbah 15:2 teaches that the first commandments given to the Jewish people was the establishment of the Jewish calendar. Why? Because true freedom begins with control over time. A slave has no control over time. A slave is dictated by their master. But when God commands the children of Israel to sanctify time, he grants them autonomy, the ability to structure their own religious life, and the responsibility to bring holiness into the world. Ramban explains that the Jewish people went from being subject to Egyptian time to sanctifying their own time. In Egypt, time was dictated by the Nile, the seasons, and the taskmasters. The Jewish calendar, however, is not passive. It requires witnesses to testify the new moon, a court to declare the month, and communal participation to observe sacred times. By sanctifying time, we assert spiritual and national sovereignty, shaping our own destiny, rather than being shaped by external forces. Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch contrasts Jewish time with other ancient cultures that saw time as cyclical, where events repeated endlessly. Judaism, however, views time as progressive, moving forward towards redemption and divine fulfillment. The commandment of the calendar is a reminder that we are always moving forward. We are preparing for something greater. Passover, the ultimate redemption, or the sanctification of everyday life. Shabbat HaChodesh reminds us that Passover is not just about remembering the past, it's about preparing for the future. It marks the beginning of a spiritual reset, an opportunity to reflect on our relationship with time, purpose, and redemption. Just as our ancestors left Egypt behind and began a new journey, we too must renew ourselves, set our sights forward, and sanctify the time we are given. The last of the special Shabbatot, is Shabbat Hagadol, the Great Shabbat, which falls on the Shabbat before Passover. And this Shabbat is different than the other four in the fact that there's no special Torah reading that comes. There's not two Torahs, but it is special in the fact that it is the final, it's the Great Sabbath before Passover. And so why is it called the Great Sabbath, Shabbat Hagadol? The Haftarah, which comes from Malachi, speaks of Elijah, the prophet, who will herald the final redemption. It says, Hine ani sholeach et Eliyahu Navi lifnei Yom Hagadol. Behold, I will send Elijah before the great and awesome day of Adonai, of Hashem. The Rambam explains that on Shabbat Hagadol, the community's leadership would deliver a special drasha to prepare the people for Pesach. Historically, there used to only be two sermons given by the rabbi in these in tefillah and services. One was Shabbat Hagadol, explaining the intricate laws of Passover before Pesach, and then the other one was on Shabbat Shuvah, right before Yom Kippur, where the rabbi would come in and explain all of the laws and special observances for Yom Kippur. The Midrash in Pesikta Rabbatai 15 teaches that on this day, the Israelites set aside their Passover lamb in Egypt, defying their oppressors and demonstrating their faith in God. Shabbat Hagadol is about active participation in redemption. The Israelites' willingness to publicly prepare for Pesach was an act of courage. They took the Pesach lamb, a deity of the Egyptians, and set it aside for sacrifice, a bold declaration of their new faith. This moment was a turning point. They were no longer just escaping slavery. They were actively choosing a new identity as servants of God. Rabbi Soloveitchik teaches that Pesach is not just about breaking free. It's about choosing a new purpose. We must remove our spiritual chametz, complacency, arrogance, and negativity. And freedom without responsibility is meaningless. Shabbat Hagadol reminds us that redemption is not passive. We must actively prepare for it. As we journey from Shabbat Shekalim to Shabbat Hagadol, we undergo a process of purification, renewal, and preparation for redemption. Each step along the way teaches us a profound lesson. Shekalim reminds us of our communal responsibility. Zachor demands that we remember and fight for our survival. Para calls us to purify ourselves in preparation for holiness. HaChodesh teaches us to take control of our time and destiny. And Hagadol reminds us that redemption requires courage and commitment. As Passover approaches, may we not only clean our homes, but also prepare our souls. May we take the lessons of Tetzaveh, leadership, holiness, and responsibility, and apply them to our journey as individuals and as a community. I wish you all a day filled with blessings and meaning. Thank you so much for joining us. And